The crystal chamber deep beneath the Zephyrian capital hummed with ancient power. High Counselor Veltar pressed his six-fingered hands against the smooth obsidian altar, his purple skin glistening with nervous sweat. Around him, 12 other members of the inner circle stood in perfect formation, their robes rustling in the artificial breeze created by the energy field. "Are we certain about this course of action?" whispered Counselor Nixera, her tentacles writhing anxiously around her neck. "The old texts speak of great danger in summoning the unknown." Veltar's three eyes focused on the holographic display floating above the altar. The image showed their beautiful blue-green world of Zephyros. But now, it was surrounded by the menacing red dots of the Vorthak Empire's war fleet. 200 massive dreadnoughts hung in space like hungry predators, each one capable of turning entire continents to glass. "The Vorthak ultimatum expires in 18 standard hours," Veltar said, his voice carrying the weight of his species' fate. "They demand our complete surrender and the enslavement of our people. We have exhausted every diplomatic option, every military strategy. Our defense fleet was destroyed in the first engagement. The memory of that battle still burned in every Zephyrian's mind. Their proud navy of 50 ships had lasted exactly 14 minutes against Vorthak technology. The enemy weapons cut through their shields like they were made of paper, and their armor crumpled like thin metal foil. "The summoning codex is our last hope," Veltar continued, placing his hand on the ancient tome that sat beside the altar. The book was older than their civilization, discovered in ruins that predated their earliest settlements by millions of years. Its pages contained knowledge that no Zephyrian mind had created, written in languages that had taken their best scholars centuries to decode. "But we don't know what we're calling," protested Counselor Thexan, his scaled hide shifting from blue to worried orange. "The translation speaks of those who walk with death and children of the harsh worlds. What if we summon something worse than the Vorthak?" Veltar looked around at his fellow counselors. Each face showed the same mixture of fear and desperate hope. The Zephyrians were a peaceful species, evolved on a world where the greatest natural threat was a mild thunderstorm. Their entire philosophy centered on harmony, cooperation, and the gentle cultivation of knowledge. War was something they read about in historical texts, not something they lived through. "The Vorthak will strip mine our world and sell our children as slaves," Veltar said quietly. "They have done this to 17 other civilizations in the past century. At least with the summoning, we have a chance." The ancient ritual required specific cosmic alignments, and their astronomers had confirmed that all conditions would be perfect within the hour. 3 moons would align with their sun, creating a gravitational resonance that would amplify the summoning energies beyond anything their technology could generate alone. "Begin the preparation," Veltar commanded. The counselors moved with practiced precision, each taking their designated position around the chamber. Crystal arrays descended from the ceiling, their surfaces covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The Zephyrians had learned not to question how the ancient devices worked. They simply followed the instructions in the codex and trusted in powers beyond their understanding. Nixara activated the quantum resonance generators, and immediately the air began to shimmer with barely contained energy. The temperature in the chamber dropped 20 degrees, and frost began forming on the walls despite their tropical climate. Strange harmonics filled the air, sounds that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly in their bones. "Energy levels at 30%, and climbing," reported Thexan, his hands dancing over controls that were part technology and part crystalline growth. "The dimensional barriers are beginning to thin. Above them, through 1,000 meters of rock and soil, Zephyrian families huddled in their homes as the Vorthak fleet moved into final attack positions." The enemy had been broadcasting propaganda for hours, describing in graphic detail what would happen to any who resisted. The Vorthak were masters of psychological warfare, breaking spirits before the first shot was fired. 50%, Thexan called out. The crystal arrays were now glowing so brightly that even their filtered visors couldn't completely block the light. "I'm detecting massive spatial distortions. Whatever we're opening, it's big." Veltar opened the codex to the final page of the ritual. The words seemed to writhe on the ancient parchment, changing from one script to another as he watched. He had memorized the incantation phonetically, though he still didn't understand what the words actually meant. 70%. The dimensional fabric is becoming unstable. Through their quantum communication network, reports were flooding in from across their world. Strange lights in the sky, gravitational anomalies, and electromagnetic disturbances unlike anything in their scientific records. Whatever they were summoning, it was affecting the entire planet. 85%. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the target dimension. Something is responding to the summons. Veltar began the incantation, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. The ancient words rolled off his tongue, each syllable causing the air itself to crack and spark. The other counselors joined in, their voices creating harmonies that shouldn't have been possible with Zephyrian vocal cords. 90%. The barrier is almost completely dissolved. I'm detecting. Wait. Thexan's voice filled with confusion. These readings can't be right. The energy signatures I'm picking up from the other side. They're enormous. And there are so many of them. The chamber filled with blinding light as reality tore open above the altar. Through the dimensional rift, they could see stars that weren't their stars, arranged in patterns that made no astronomical sense. But more disturbing were the dark shapes moving between those alien constellations, massive forms that blocked out entire sectors of the foreign sky. By the ancient spirits, whispered Nyxera, what have we done? The rift stabilized, becoming a perfect circle of otherworldly space hanging 3 meters above their heads. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a single object dropped through the portal, landing with a metallic clang on the altar. It was a small device, roughly cylindrical, made from materials that didn't match anything in their periodic table. As they watched, one end of the device began to glow, and a beam of coherent light projected a 3-dimensional image into the chamber. The figure that appeared was unlike anything in their biological databases. It stood on 2 legs, had 2 arms, and a head that was almost spherical. Its skin was a pale brown color, and it wore some kind of uniform in dark blue and silver. Most disturbing were its eyes, small, forward-facing, predatory. This was clearly a creature that had evolved to hunt. Greetings, the figure said, its voice emerging from the device in perfect Zephyrian. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force. We received your dimensional distress call, and we are prepared to render assistance. Veltar found his voice after a moment of stunned silence. We summoned you to help us defend our world from invaders. The Vorthok Empire has demanded our surrender. The human's expression didn't change, but something shifted in those predatory eyes. The Vorthak, she repeated. We're familiar with them. How long do you have before their attack begins? 17 hours and 32 minutes, Veltar replied automatically. Admiral Chen nodded once. That's sufficient time. Please maintain this dimensional gateway. Our fleet will begin transit immediately. Your fleet? Nyxera asked. How many ships do you have? For the first time, the human smiled, revealing white teeth that were clearly designed for tearing flesh. All of them. The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrians staring at the dimensional rift in stunned silence. Then, the first human ship began to emerge from the portal. It was nothing like Vorthak or Zephyrian vessel design. Where their ships were smooth and curved, this one was angular and brutal, covered in armor plates and weapon emplacements. It looked like it had been built for war and nothing else. Gun barrels protruded from every surface, and the hull was scarred with the marks of countless battles. It's only slightly larger than our destroyers, Thexan observed, but the energy readings. How is something that size generating more power than our entire planetary grid? The human ship cleared the portal and immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. This is UHS Retribution to Zephyrian Control. We are securing the dimensional gateway. Please evacuate all civilian populations from the capital city to a minimum safe distance of 200 kilometers. Why? Veltar asked, speaking into his communicator with growing concern. Because, came the reply, you're about to see what happens when someone threatens a species under human protection. And we've found that our methods can be intense. More ships were emerging from the portal now. Dozens, then hundreds. each one bristling with weapons that made Vorthak technology look primitive. But these weren't the massive dreadnoughts that the Vorthak favored. These were smaller, faster, built for precision strikes and overwhelming firepower concentration. "How many are coming?" Veltar asked. "The initial response force consists of 1,200 ships." Admiral Chen's voice replied through the communication system. "If the Vorthak prove particularly stubborn, we can summon additional assets. 1,200 ships." The Zephyrians had never imagined that such a fleet could exist. Their entire understanding of space warfare was based on the principle that bigger was better, that massive dreadnoughts were the ultimate expression of military power. But these human vessels looked like predators, built for speed and lethality rather than raw intimidation. What are humans?" Veltar asked hesitantly. "We're what happens when evolution takes place on a world that actively tries to kill everything that lives on it," came the reply. "Amatake. We're what you get when you force a species to fight for survival against ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, predators with teeth longer than your arms, diseases that can wipe out continents, and weather patterns that can level mountains." The portal continued to disgorge human ships, and now Veltar could see the differences in their designs. Some were sleek and fast, clearly built for reconnaissance and quick strikes. Others were heavily armored and bristling with the largest weapons he had ever seen. Still others were stranger, covered in devices whose purposes he couldn't even guess. "Are you warriors?" Nixara asked. "We're survivors," Admiral Chen replied. "And we've learned that the best way to survive is to make sure that anything threatening you doesn't survive instead." High above Zephyros, the Vorthak fleet maintained its formation, unaware that anything had changed. Their sensors couldn't detect the dimensional rift, and the human ships emerging from it were still too small to register on their long-range detection systems. The Vorthak were confident in their superiority, having crushed every species they had encountered. They had no idea that they had just encountered humanity. "Admiral," Veltar said, his voice trembling with a mixture of hope and terror. "What are you going to do to them?" "We're going to give them exactly one chance to leave your system peacefully," came the reply. "And when they refuse, as they undoubtedly will, we're going to demonstrate why humans are considered the most dangerous species in our galaxy." "Your galaxy?" "Oh yes," Admiral Chen said, and Veltar could hear the predatory smile in her voice. "You didn't summon help from your own dimension, Counselor. You reached across the barriers between realities and called for aid from a universe where war is an art form, where peace is maintained through superior firepower, and where humanity has spent the last 1,000 years proving that we are very, very good at breaking things." The last of the human fleet emerged from the portal, and immediately, the dimensional rift began to contract. "We're closing the gateway to prevent any Vorthak from following us back to our reality," Admiral Chen explained. "Don't worry. We brought everything we need." As the portal snapped shut, leaving only empty air above the altar, Veltar realized that they had indeed summoned something beyond their wildest imagination. Whether they had saved their world or doomed it remained to be seen. But 17 hours and 31 minutes later, the Vorthak would learn what it meant to threaten a species under human protection. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UHS Retribution, watching as her fleet formed into attack formation around Zephyros. Through the vast transparent aluminum viewports, she could see the Vorthak fleet maintaining their arrogant position directly above the planet's main continent. 200 massive ships, each one the size of a small city, bristling with enough firepower to sterilize a world. "Tactical analysis complete, Admiral," reported Commander Martinez from the sensor station. "The Vorthak are using standard Imperial formation, 7 Alpha, heavy dreadnoughts in the center, support vessels on the flanks, fighter screens deployed in a defensive perimeter." Sarah nodded, accessing the tactical display with a thought. The neural interface provided by her command implant painted the enemy formation in glowing red symbols across her vision. Everything about the Vorthak deployment screamed overconfidence. They had positioned themselves as if they were facing primitives armed with rocks and pointed sticks. "Standard Imperial tactics," she mused. "Heavy armor, massive weapons, overwhelming firepower. They're designed to fight other dreadnought fleets in traditional line of battle formations." She smiled coldly. Good thing we don't fight traditionally. Captain Wu from the bridge crew spoke up. Ma'am, we're receiving multiple communications from the Vorthak fleet. They're demanding to know who we are and ordering us to withdraw from their operational zone immediately. Put them through, Sarah ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the image of a Vorthak fleet commander. The alien was typical of his species, 3 meters tall, covered in metallic scales, with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His uniform was decorated with the bones of conquered enemies, a practice that had once intimidated entire star systems. I am Warmaster Krektal of the 7th Conquest Fleet, the alien growled, his voice distorted by the translation matrix. You will identify yourselves immediately and withdraw from this system. This world belongs to the Vorthak Empire by right of conquest. Sarah stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back in a pose that every human military officer had learned to recognize as dangerous. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force. This world is now under the protection of the Human Federation. I am ordering you to withdraw your fleet immediately. Krektal's forearms gestured dismissively. Humans? I have never heard of your pathetic species. You have 12 small ships against 200 Imperial dreadnoughts. Surrender now, and I may allow some of you to live as slaves. 1,200 ships, Sarah corrected quietly. The Warmaster's expression changed as his sensors finally registered the true scope of the human fleet. The smaller human vessels had been using advanced stealth technology, appearing as nothing more than sensor ghosts, until they chose to reveal themselves. Now the Vorthak tactical display was lighting up with contact after contact, each one representing a ship specifically designed to kill things much larger than itself. Impossible, Krektal snarled. No species can field such a fleet. My intelligence reports indicate that you are a pre-contact civilization. Your intelligence is several universes out of date, Sarah replied. You have 10 minutes to begin withdrawal from this system. After that, we will consider you a hostile force and act accordingly. Krektal's laugh was like grinding metal. 10 minutes? Little human, do you know what my ships have done to the last 17 species that defied us? We have turned entire worlds into tomb worlds. We have harvested the populations of star systems. Your pathetic vessels cannot even scratch our armor. Sarah's expression didn't change. 8 minutes and 30 seconds. The transmission cut off, and immediately the Vorthak fleet began moving into attack formation. Their massive dreadnoughts turned their weapon arrays toward the human positions, while fighters began launching from their carrier bays. It was an impressive display of military might, the kind that had broken the spirit of countless civilizations. All ships. This is Admiral Chen, Sarah broadcast on the fleet channel. You are authorized to engage hostile forces. Rules of engagement are unrestricted. Show them why nobody threatens humanity's friends. The response was immediate. Across the human fleet, weapon systems that had been dormant suddenly came online. Energy signatures that had been carefully masked blazed to life as shields, guns, and exotic weapon systems reached full power. The 1,200 human ships transformed from seemingly harmless vessels into the most dangerous fleet ever assembled. Captain Wu was monitoring the energy readings. Admiral, the Zephyrians are requesting clarification. They want to know why we're not moving to engage. We? Tell them to watch and learn, Sarah replied. Today, they're going to see what human military doctrine really looks like. The Vorthak opened fire first, as Sarah had known they would. Massive energy beams lanced out from their dreadnoughts, each one carrying enough power to destroy a human ship instantly. The alien weapons were designed for overwhelming destruction, the kind of brute force that had conquered dozens of star systems. Every single shot missed. The human fleet had scattered the moment the Vorthak weapons fired, moving with a speed and precision that defied everything the aliens understood about space combat. Human ships danced between the energy beams like they were moving through still water instead of the vacuum of space. Their acceleration curves were impossible. Their turning radii violated basic physics, and their coordination was flawless. Impossible, Krektal screamed over the communication channel. No ships can move like that. Ours can, Sarah replied calmly. You see, Warmaster, Your species never learned the most important lesson of warfare. It's not the size of your guns that matters. It's whether you can hit your target. The human counterattack began with surgical precision. Instead of matching the Vorthak formation ship for ship, the human fleet broke into dozens of smaller attack groups. Each group consisted of different ship types: fast attack craft, heavy gunships, electronic warfare vessels, and specialized hunter-killers working in perfect coordination. The first Vorthak ship to die was the dreadnought Bone Crusher, Krektal's former flagship. A group of human destroyers had appeared seemingly from nowhere, their stealth systems allowing them to close to point-blank range undetected. They didn't try to penetrate the massive ship's armor. Instead, they targeted specific systems with weapons that no Vorthak engineer had ever imagined. Gravity bombs collapsed sections of the ship's superstructure. Quantum disruptors made entire weapon arrays simply cease to exist. Neural warfare programs turned the ship's own computer systems against its crew. In less than 30 seconds, the most powerful ship in the Vorthak fleet had been reduced to a drifting hulk. "Target down," reported the destroyer group leader, with professional satisfaction. Moving to secondary targets. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships were appearing from impossible angles, striking with weapons that bypassed conventional defenses, then vanishing before the Vorthak could respond. It wasn't a battle in any sense that the aliens understood. It was a demonstration of technological and tactical superiority so complete that resistance seemed pointless. "How?" Krektal demanded, his voice breaking as he watched another of his dreadnoughts consumed by some kind of exotic energy weapon that turned its armor into rapidly expanding plasma. "How are you doing this? How are you doing this?" "Evolution," Sarah replied simply. "Your species conquered through brute force. You built bigger ships, bigger guns, bigger armor. But humans? We evolved on a world that taught us that survival isn't about being the biggest predator. It's about being the smartest." A human cruiser decloaked directly behind a Vorthak support vessel and fired a single shot. The weapon didn't produce any visible beam or projectile. But the alien ship simply folded in on itself as its molecular structure was reorganized at the quantum level. Where there had been a kilometer-long warship, there was now a perfectly spherical object about the size of a basketball. "Every weapon system you're seeing was developed to fight enemies that could kill us with their bare hands," Sarah continued, watching as her ship systematically dismantled the Vorthak formation. "We learned to build smart weapons because we couldn't afford to waste ammunition. We learned to build fast ships because standing still meant dying. We learned to coordinate perfectly because individual heroics just got you killed." The Vorthak were trying to adapt, but their doctrine had no answer for human tactics. Their massive ships were designed to absorb punishment and dish out overwhelming firepower. But the humans weren't fighting that kind of battle. Instead, they were targeting specific systems, exploiting weaknesses that the Vorthak had never known existed, using weapons that attacked matter and energy in ways that violated the aliens' understanding of physics. "Admiral," Commander Martinez reported, "the Zephyrians are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're asking if we need assistance." Sarah almost smiled. "Tell them thank you, but we're fine. And remind them that they might want to record this. Other species should know what happens when someone threatens humanity's friends." The battle, if it could even be called that, was winding down. Of the 200 Vorthak ships that had entered the system with such confidence, only about 30 remained functional. The rest had been disabled, destroyed, or converted into geometric shapes that were probably going to puzzle alien archaeologists for centuries to come. "War Master Krektal," Sarah called over the communication channel, "I believe you still have functional engines on your remaining ships. I'm going to give you one more opportunity to leave this system." The Vorthak commander's image appeared on the screen again, but now he looked like a broken alien. His uniform was torn, his scales were dulled with shock, and his forearms trembled with barely contained fear. "What? What are you?" "We're humans," Sarah said simply. "We're the species that survived ice ages by learning to make fire. We survived predators by learning to make tools. We survived diseases by learning medicine. We survived our own violent nature by learning to direct that violence outward, toward things that threatened what we protected." She gestured toward the tactical display, where the remaining Vorthak ships were clustered in a defensive formation that would have been laughable if it wasn't so pathetic. Your empire conquered through fear and brute force, but humans learned long ago that the real power in the universe doesn't come from having the biggest stick. It comes from being so dangerous that nobody wants to find out what happens if they threaten you. Krektal was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. We will withdraw. You will do more than that, Sarah said, her voice taking on a tone that made every human on the bridge stand straighter. You will return to your empire and deliver a message. The Zephyrians are now under human protection. Any Vorthak ship that enters this system will be destroyed without warning. Any Vorthak force that threatens any human ally will find themselves facing the full might of the human defense force. And if your empire has a problem with that, she continued, they're welcome to come discuss it with us. But I should warn you. Today you only saw our rapid response force. If your empire wants to start a real war with humanity, they'll discover that we have much bigger fleets, much more dangerous weapons, and absolutely no patience for bullies. The remaining Vorthak ships began moving toward the edge of the system, their previously proud formation now looking like a retreat in everything but name. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, Krektal's voice came over the communication channel one last time. Why? He asked. Why did you come? The Zephyrians are nothing to you. They have no resources you need. No territory you want. Why risk war with the Empire for strangers? Sarah looked at the image of Zephyros rotating peacefully on her tactical display, its blue-green surface unmarked by the violence that had just taken place above it. Because they asked for help, she said simply. And humans have never been very good at ignoring a call for aid. The Vorthak fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only debris and the lingering question of how a species that had ruled through fear for centuries had just been completely outmatched by beings they had never heard of. Admiral, Captain Wu reported, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian High Council. Put them through. High Counselor Veltar's image appeared on the screen, his three eyes wide with an emotion that might have been awe or terror. Admiral Chen, we cannot adequately express our gratitude. You have saved our entire civilization. You're welcome, Sarah replied. Though I should mention that this isn't over. The Vorthak will report back to their empire, and there's a good chance they'll try to organize a larger response. We'll need to discuss establishing a permanent defense arrangement. Anything, Veltar said immediately. Name your price, Sarah shook her head. We don't want payment. But we would like to establish a formal alliance. In our experience, the galaxy is a dangerous place, and it's always better to have friends watching your back. You would ally with us? Even though we are weak? Weak? Sarah looked puzzled. Counselor, you just accomplished something that most species in our galaxy have never managed. You created a dimensional summoning circle that reached across the barriers between realities and called for help. That's not weakness. That's resourcefulness. Besides, she added with a slight smile, humans have learned that strength isn't just about military power. You have knowledge, technology, and perspectives that we lack. In an alliance, everyone contributes what they can. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts as her fleet began forming up for the return journey. Around Zephyros, the debris of the Vorthak fleet was already being collected by human salvage teams, while engineering crews worked to establish the quantum communication relays that would link this system to the human defense network. Admiral, Commander Martinez said quietly, the crew is asking about shore leave. Apparently, the Zephyrians have some very interesting recreational facilities, and their culture emphasizes hospitality. Sarah nodded absently. After a successful operation, the crew deserved some relaxation. Approved. But make sure everyone understands that they're representing humanity here. I want our new allies to have a positive first impression. Understood, although... Martinez hesitated. Ma'am, should we be concerned about the Vorthak Empire's response to this? We just humiliated one of their conquest fleets. Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking about the vast empire that lay somewhere out there in this alien universe. The Vorthak had ruled through fear for centuries, conquering species after species with their doctrine of overwhelming force. But they had never encountered humans before, had never faced a species that had turned warfare into a precise science. "Let them come," she said finally. "If the Vorthak want a war, they'll get one. But it won't be the kind of war they're used to fighting. And when it's over, there will be a few less bullies in this galaxy." 3 months had passed since the humiliation at Zephyros, and the Vorthak Empire was gathering its strength for revenge. In the throne chamber of the Imperial Palace on Vorthak Prime, Supreme Emperor Thulvar listened to the reports with growing rage. His massive form, nearly 4 meters tall and covered in ceremonial bone armor made from the skulls of conquered species, dominated the crystalline throne that had been carved from a single asteroid. "Explain to me again," he growled, his voice causing the chamber walls to vibrate, "how a single fleet of unknown aliens destroyed our 7th Conquest Fleet." War Master Krektal stood before the throne, his once proud bearing now broken by the memory of his defeat. The scars on his metallic scales had been deliberately left unhealed, a reminder of his failure. "Great Emperor, the humans possessed technology beyond our understanding. Their ships moved in ways that violated physics. Their weapons turned our dreadnoughts into geometric sculptures. The Emperor's 4 arms gripped the throne's armrests, his claws leaving deep grooves in the ancient crystal. For 800 years, the Vorthak Empire had expanded unchallenged across their galaxy. 17 species had been conquered, enslaved, or exterminated. Their military doctrine was perfected through centuries of successful campaigns. "One species," Thulvar hissed. "One unknown species appears from nowhere and destroys 200 of our finest ships. And you tell me they did it without losing a single vessel?" "Yes, Great Emperor. Our weapons could not touch them. They fought like they had seen our tactics before, and prepared specific counters for everything we could do." Admiral Zexhar, the Empire's chief military strategist, stepped forward. His uniform bore the insignia of 100 conquered worlds. "My Emperor, I have analyzed the battle recordings. The humans did not fight like any species we have encountered. They used coordinated pack tactics, overwhelming technological superiority, and weapon systems that appear to manipulate matter at the quantum level." "Are you telling me," the Emperor said slowly, "that we face an enemy more advanced than the Empire?" "In terms of military technology, yes. But Great Emperor, they appeared through some kind of dimensional portal. They may not even be from our reality." Emperor Thulvar stood from his throne, his massive frame casting shadows across the assembled court. The walls of the chamber were lined with the preserved heads of defeated enemy commanders, a tradition dating back to the Empire's founding. Soon, he promised himself, human heads would join that collection. "Ready the Grand Armada," he commanded. "Summon every available ship from across the Empire. I want 3,000 dreadnoughts, 10,000 support vessels, and the full might of the Imperial fleet. If these humans think they can embarrass the Vorthak Empire and escape consequences, they will learn otherwise." "My Emperor," Admiral Zexhar said carefully, "perhaps we should consider a diplomatic solution. The humans claim to be protecting the Zephyrians. If we simply avoid that system..." The Emperor's backhanded blow sent Zexhar flying across the chamber. The Admiral struck the wall with enough force to crack the ancient stone, his bones breaking with audible snaps. "The Vorthak Empire does not negotiate with inferiors. We conquer or we destroy. There is no third option." Guards dragged the injured Admiral away as Emperor Thulvar activated the Empire-wide communication system. His image appeared on screens across hundreds of worlds, in the command centers of thousands of warships, in the slave camps where conquered populations toiled for imperial glory. "Citizens of the Empire," he declared, his voice carrying the authority of 8 centuries of absolute rule. "We face an unprecedented challenge. Unknown aliens calling themselves humans have dared to interfere with imperial expansion. They have destroyed one of our conquest fleets, and claimed to place primitive species under their protection. The massive view screen behind the throne activated, showing images of the battle at Zephyros. The footage had been carefully edited to remove the most embarrassing moments, but even so, the sight of Vorthak dreadnoughts being systematically destroyed was shocking to Imperial viewers who had never seen their military defeated. This insult cannot stand, the Emperor continued. Therefore, I am mobilizing the full might of the Imperial fleet. Every ship, every warrior, every weapon of mass destruction will be brought to bear against these humans. We will find their homeworld, and we will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Empire. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the Empire, shipyards worked around the clock to prepare vessels for deployment. Weapon manufactories switched to wartime production. Military academies graduated their students early to provide officers for the expanded fleet. The Empire's entire industrial capacity focused on a single goal: the complete annihilation of humanity. Meanwhile, in a parallel universe, Admiral Chen was receiving reports that painted a very different picture of the situation. The human monitoring station that had been established near the dimensional rift was picking up massive quantum signatures from the Vorthak galaxy, clear evidence that the aliens were preparing something enormous. The energy readings are off the charts, reported Dr. Elizabeth Park, the station's chief scientist. Whatever they're building over there, it's at least 50 times larger than the fleet we faced at Zephyros. Admiral Chen studied the data streams flowing across her command center's holographic displays. The Human Defense Force had been expecting retaliation, but the scope of the Vorthak response was larger than anyone had anticipated. How many ships are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 15,000. Possibly more. And Admiral, they're not just gathering warships. We're detecting the energy signatures of planet-killer weapons, stellar manipulation devices, and what appear to be dimensional warfare systems. Chen nodded grimly. The Vorthak were clearly planning to bring their full military might to bear, probably hoping to overwhelm human forces through sheer numbers. It was a reasonable strategy, given their previous experience with warfare, but they had made one crucial mistake. They still didn't understand what they were really fighting. Dr. Park, open a quantum communication channel to High Command. Priority 1. Encryption. Within moments, the image of Fleet Admiral Harrison Roberts appeared on the main screen. Roberts was a veteran of the Centauri campaign and the Andromeda incident, with over 60 years of experience in interstellar warfare. His weathered face bore the scars of battles fought across 3 galaxies. "Sarah," he said without preamble, "we've been monitoring the situation. The Vorthak are mobilizing everything they have." "I know, sir. The question is how we want to handle this. My rapid response force is sufficient to deal with their current fleet. But if they're bringing 15,000 ships..." We could reinforce you," Roberts mused. "But frankly, I think this is an opportunity rather than a problem. The Vorthak Empire has been bullying species across their galaxy for centuries. If we crush their main fleet here, we might end their expansion permanently. What are you thinking, sir?" Robert's expression grew thoughtful. "How would you like to command the largest human fleet ever assembled? I'm talking about pulling ships from every sector, every defense force, every special operations unit. Show these aliens what happens when someone threatens human allies." "Sir, that would require..." Chen paused, running calculations in her head. "We're talking about 30,000 ships minimum. The logistics alone would be staggering." "Already in motion," Roberts replied with a slight smile. "The President signed the authorization this morning. Operation Galactic Shield is now active. Every available vessel in the Human Defense Force is being reassigned to your command." Chen felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had never commanded anything larger than a battle group, and now she was being given responsibility for the largest military force in human history. "Sir, are we sure this is necessary? The Vorthak may be numerous, but their technology is still centuries behind ours. Sarah, this isn't just about winning a battle. This is about sending a message to every aggressive species in that galaxy. Humanity protects its friends, and anyone who tests that protection will face consequences beyond their worst nightmares." Over the following weeks, ships began arriving through enlarged dimensional portals that human engineering teams had established throughout the local star cluster. Dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the Vorthak had ever built emerged from hyperspace alongside carriers packed with fighters that could think for themselves. Stealth cruisers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously took positions next to battleships armed with weapons that could collapse stars. The crown jewel of the human fleet was the UHS Prometheus, a ship so large that it had its own internal weather systems. Built as a mobile command center for galaxy-spanning operations, the Prometheus contained manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. Admiral Chen transferred her flag to the massive vessel, establishing her command center in a chamber that offered a panoramic view of the assembled human fleet. "Final count, Admiral," reported Captain Torres, Chen's new chief of staff. 32,417 vessels. Everything from scout ships to fortress-class dreadnoughts. The fleet masses more than some small moons. Chen looked out at the spectacular display of human military might. Ships stretched away in all directions, their formation extending for millions of kilometers. Each vessel represented the pinnacle of human technology, built by a species that had learned to wage war with mathematical precision. What's the status of the dimensional monitoring stations? The Vorthak fleet is almost ready to move. They've gathered at a staging area about 50 light-years from Zephyros. Intelligence estimates they'll begin their advance within 72 hours. And the Zephyrians? They've been relocated to safe zones as requested. High Counselor Veltar wanted to stay and observe the battle, but we convinced him that this engagement might get a bit intense for civilian observers. Chen smiled at that understatement. The weapons her fleet carried could reshape continents, and the defensive systems could deflect attacks that would crack planets. When 30,000 human warships opened fire simultaneously, the results tended to be visible from several star systems away. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. "In approximately 72 hours, we will face the largest enemy fleet ever assembled against human forces. The Vorthak Empire believes that overwhelming numbers will compensate for their technological disadvantages. They believe that their 8 centuries of conquest make them superior to a species they've never heard of." She paused, looking out at the vast armada under her command. "They're about to learn why humans are considered the most dangerous species in known space. They're about to discover what happens when you threaten something under human protection, and they're going to find out why every other aggressive species in our galaxy learned to be very, very careful about picking fights with Earth's children." The response from 30,000 ships was immediate and unified. "Acknowledged, Admiral. Ready to engage." In the Vorthak staging area, Emperor Thulvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, a vessel so massive that it required artificial gravity generators just to hold itself together. Around him, the Grand Armada stretched to the horizon, 15,000 ships, representing 8 centuries of military tradition and technological development. "Begin the advance," he commanded. "Today, we will show the galaxy that the Vorthak Empire cannot be challenged. Today, we will crush these humans and claim their technology for the Empire." The Vorthak fleet began moving toward Zephyros, confident in their overwhelming numerical superiority. They had no way of knowing that they were not advancing toward a single star system, but toward the assembled might of humanity itself. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and only one species would survive to tell the story. As the two fleets moved toward their confrontation, sensor networks throughout both galaxies recorded unprecedented energy readings. The quantum disturbances were so massive that they affected subspace itself, creating gravitational waves that would be detected by astronomers for decades to come. What happened next would reshape the understanding of warfare, technology, and the balance of power between species for generations to come. The Vorthak Empire had ruled through fear for 8 centuries, but they had never encountered humans before. And humanity was about to teach them that in the vast cosmos, there was always something more dangerous than the biggest predator in any given system. The real predators were the ones who had learned that survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most ruthless when something threatened what you protected. The humans were all three.